David R. here. Today I'm going to talk to you about this book, Night, by Elie Wiesel. This story is told by Holocaust survivor Elie Wiesel. This is a book written about what happened to him during the Nazi occupation of Budapest. He was born in Sighet, Romania. In 1944, Budapest radio announced that the fascist party had seized power. German troops had penetrated the Hungarian territory with the government's approval. In less than 3 days, German tanks and troops were on the streets of Sighet. Before shipping everyone off to the death camps, the Germans arrested all the Jewish leaders in the community. They also prohibited Jews from leaving their homes for 3 days under penalty of death. Germans forced the Jews to wear a gold star. Germans divided Sighet into 2 ghettos, and Germans placed barbed wire around the ghettos. Elie's family had a couple chances to escape. One in particular was from a former maid. She offered them a safe house, but Elie's father declined the request. Eventually, Elie and his family were placed in a cattle car that held 81 people. The first camp they arrived at was Birkenau. This was a sub-camp of Auschwitz. According to Remember.org, Birkenau was the largest and most lethal of all the Auschwitz camps. When they got out of the cattle car, an SS soldier was holding a gun and said, "Men to the left, women to the right." 8 words spoken quietly, indifferently, without emotion. 8 simple, short words. Men to the left, women to the right. The first images they saw of the camp was fire and a barbed wire fence. There was a chimney where the bodies were cremated in the crematoria. There was also a truck full of children being prepared to be burned as well. Elie wrote these words, "Never shall I forget that night, the first night in camp, that turned my life into one long night, 7 times sealed. Never shall I forget that smoke. Never shall I forget the small faces of the children whose bodies I saw transformed into smoke under a silent sky. Never shall I forget those flames that consumed my faith forever. Never shall I forget the nocturnal silence that deprived me for all eternity of the desire to live. Never shall I forget those moments that murdered my God and my soul and turned my dreams to ashes. Never shall I forget those things, even were I condemned to live as long as God Himself. Never." Inmates were stripped of their clothes, and every hair on their body was shaven. Veteran inmates tattooed numbers on the incoming inmate's left arm. Elie was known as A7713. Prisoners at the death camps slept in barracks. Elie and other prisoners remained at this camp for 3 weeks before being moved to Buna. This was the largest sub-camp of Auschwitz. When they arrived, Elie said that some of the SS guards had an interest in several 10 to 12-year-old boys. It's because apparently there was a homosexual ring that took children and sex trafficked them. There were dentists at the camp, and they were looking at teeth. Now, they weren't looking at teeth in order to repair them. They were looking at teeth to find gold, and they just tear the gold out. Elie had to give up his gold crown to keep a couple from beating his father. Elie loved his father, and his father is mentioned throughout the book. Elie does his best to keep his father alive. A Kappel was a prisoner, a fellow Jew, who collaborated with the Nazis. And some of these Kappels were extremely violent. All prisoners were starved and beaten for any reason whatsoever. One day, Elie saw one of the Kappels with a young, half-naked Polish girl. And just for him having witnessed that, he was subject to 25 lashes. And these were extremely painful. So painful, I believe he had fainted during this lashing. Now, at some point, Elie starts to rebel against God. He stops praying. He said, "What are you, my God?" I thought angrily, "Blessed be God's name? Why? But why would I bless him?" Every fiber of my being rebelled. Now, there was a matter of indifference at the camp. Prisoners had gone through everything, seen everything, so they became numb. The SS would routinely do what was called selection, and if somebody was selected, they were selected to die and be cremated. Elie's father got selected once, but he proved that he was useful, and they didn't cremate him. But Elie was really upset and didn't want his father to be killed. At some point, Elie's foot became swollen and he needed surgery. And surprisingly, the doctors gave him surgery and fixed it. Now, he had to rest for a while, and he was told to, I think, rest for a few weeks. But one of the prisoners was saying, "Hey, if you are in here, you're going to die," especially if he's in there that long. And also, the Russians were going to occupy the camp, so everybody was to be moved. Now, Elie thought, I could stay here, or I could go with those guys, because if he stayed, he might die, and if he left with everybody else, he had a chance of living. But little did he know that if he had stayed, the Russians would have saved him. So Elie joined prisoners, and they marched in the snow all the way to a camp called Auschwitz. This was a treacherous journey. People died along the way. They froze to death. Elie said it snowed and snowed and snowed endlessly. After they arrived at Auschwitz, they weren't given any food or water for 3 days. So many of the prisoners started eating snow in order to stay alive. Eventually, they were sent to Buchenwald via train. And soon after, Elie's father had contracted dysentery and died. Within days, Elie and everyone was freed by the Americans. Now, this is a compelling book. But you should also read this one as well. Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning. Both of these are truly fascinating books. It shows you what people can go through and still survive if they have the will to live. Well, anyway, that's all I got. Talk to you later. Bye.
My name is Norman Krasner. I was a captain in an Air Force film unit. Before the war, I was employed at Warner Brothers Studios. Captain Ellis Carter of Paramount Studios photographed these pictures, and Lieutenant William Graff, also of Warner Brothers, was the third member of our party, which reached Buchenwald, a concentration camp near Weimar, Germany, a few hours after our tanks bypassed it. We testify these pictures are truly as represented. There were 21,000 people here the day we came, April 13th, 1945. 19,000 people had been marched off the day before. These are Russians, Poles, Hungarians, Belgians, French, Norwegians, Czechs, English. Some Americans had been interned here temporarily. About half of these people are Jews. Legally, meaning Nazi legal, these people are political prisoners. Here is a 3-year-old political prisoner. "150 people died the day we came of malnutrition, tuberculosis, typhus, etc. 150 also died the second day, and also the third. You might ask why our humane army did not save them. Medical science could not. Before the sinking of their vitality could be arrested, they reached death. Most of these human skeletons are now dead. If you were an inmate here, you would be fed soup once a day and some bread. The amount varied. How little it was can be judged by the practice the prisoners had of supporting corpses between them at roll call so they could have the dead man's ration. And this was punishable by death. This loudspeaker used to blare out numbers, day or night. If your number was called, you took your papers and reported to a room where you were hung on a hook, a foot off the ground. This hanging is not a drop of 20 feet which mercifully breaks your neck, but a slow, agonizing strangulation which takes 5 to 8 minutes. 2 or 3 men would hang from the same hook. If you weren't dead, you were bashed over the head with this club. This wasn't consideration for you, but for the man in charge of the ovens upstairs who wanted his bodies to lie still. We had color film and could not photograph interiors, but you get the idea. There were 2 ovens, each with a capacity for 6 persons. Only 150 to 200 persons a day could be cremated. You would be surprised how hard it is to dispose of human bodies. The Germans used lime pits too, but this was at a commando or subsidiary. There are about 70 persons represented in this pile, which makes excellent fertilizer. This man was an editor of a newspaper in Warsaw. He is showing us where a Nazi hit him in the mouth with a rifle butt. He seems to be in good control of himself, but as he recalled the time the Nazis came for him, when they took his year-old child and stamped on its chest and shot his wife before his eyes for protesting, he became hysterical. We were determined that the people of Weimar see the sample of their culture, and we marched 3,000 of them to the camp. They saw. These are not pieces of parchment, they are human skins. They were used to bind books and make lampshades. Here are a man's breasts for the doubtful. The best samples were sent away, of course, but a lamp remained. Some lamps were made with human bones. We had to be content with this one. The wife of the previous commandant, a Madame Koch, was responsible for this art development. She would have men stripped, and if their tattoo pleased her, or, as in these cases, if she thought they would please her, the man would be killed and the skin treated. This is a photograph of Madame Koch. She is 28 years old, an excellent horsewoman, and known for her kindness to animals. Shrinking heads was a lost art. It was a difficult matter to get heads to practice on, but the Germans licked that. They claimed they didn't know this existed. Perhaps. But this camp is many miles long and broad on the outskirts of the city. What did they think was here? And what of the 2 million SS men with brothers and sisters and sweethearts? They must have known. How many millions must know something before it isn't a secret? The Germans are quite well dressed, better than any nation in Europe. Sweaters from Belgium, shirts from Czechoslovakia, stockings from France, diamonds from Amsterdam. Here's a Belgian SS man. They drafted the scum of conquered nations into their ranks. Here's a German SS lieutenant. Here's a Ukrainian SS man. This is the wife of the local hangman. He left her behind when they ran away. He had hung over 5,000 prisoners. The guards say they were forced to kill. This is a lie. The guards in Buchenwald enjoyed it. It was a huge circus. They made games of killing, by digging a pit and burying a man to his head and then throwing rocks at the head until it disappeared, or rolling a man in a spiked barrel down a hill, or, as a Christmas present in 1943, making 23,000 people stand in the courtyard for 26 hours, many without shoes, for no reason, just Merry Christmas. Here's how 2 American Medical Corps men reacted. At Dachau, we had the Germans clear the bodies. %70 of all autopsies show tuberculosis. Well, that's what it was like. Except for the smell, you're now a big expert on Buchenwald. If anyone tells you atrocity stories are exaggerated, think of these people. Lawyers, doctors, editors, musicians, judges. It's hard to believe these people were rich and dignified when their ribs are sticking out. And who can tell who's a Jew and who's a Christian in this pile? Perhaps the man across your dinner table, who tells you these things are exaggerated, knows the difference.